This is David Kerans for Radio VR in Washington. I'm speaking today with Professor Padma Desai, Gladys and Roland Harriman Professor of Comparative Economic Systems and the Director of the Center for Transition Economies at Columbia. Today's topic is the economic sanctions which are still developing against Russia regarding the unification of Russia and Crimea and what that may mean for Russian economic development.
First of all, the sanctions so far have been very limited. There are visa bans and asset freezes in London banks of a few oligarchs, 21 of them, right? So the sanctions have not been extended to trade and investment flows to and from Russia. So first of all, we must recognize that the sanctions are very limited. Now, given the limited nature of the sanctions, what is their impact? The Russian economy has not been crippled. And at the same time, the policy response of the policymakers to the sanctions has been very, very smart and quite liberal, actually. If you look at the policy response of Elvira Nabiullina, the chairwoman of the Central Bank of Russia, she has kept the ruble floating freely. There are no foreign exchange controls. She has even reduced capital requirements to asset backing by Russian banks in order to encourage bank lending. So if the banks are required to keep fewer capital to their risky assets, they can lend more. So she's saying, okay, capital from outside is not coming into Russia, but Russian banks themselves can lend because we are easing these requirements. Why is this liberal policy making by the Central Bank of Russia? I mean, it's something, to me, it's very striking and quite remarkable. Why? Because there are two factors. The foreign exchange reserves in the coffers of the Central Bank of Russia, think of it. How much? $494 billion. These are the foreign exchange reserves of the Central Bank of Russia. So if $70 billion worth of capital flows out of Russia, say in the first quarter of 2014, the central bank can still manage it, right? Because there are enormous reserves. And secondly, government debt to GDP ratio is a very low 8.4%. in 2013. So think of what the government debt to GDP ratio of the United States is. In the way in which you measure it, it is almost 70%.
Yes.
The Russian is 8.4%. So it is, given these enormous reserves in the Central Bank of Russia, foreign exchange reserves, and the low debt to government debt to GDP ratio, it's not a situation economically which is panicky or worrisome because $70 billion left in the first quarter of 2014. But having said that, I would like to quote former Finance Minister Alexei Kudrin, who said that if the sanctions are extended further, meaning if they are extended to trade and investment flow restrictions, then Russia's GDP growth in 2014 may turn out to be zero, according to Alexei Kudrin. And I tend to support him. So it is advisable, therefore, for Russian policymakers to sort of keep away from any military adventurism, right, and stay put with with internal economic policy measures.
Can I ask you now about sentiment or opinion which is beginning to swell in Russia regarding the possibility that economic sanctions, should they even develop, would, beyond what they are now, would stimulate the Russian economy to develop from within and to escape the export dependency which they've ridden
I
for
have
so
always
long?
regarded Russia as a sort of a country with enormous technological expertise, a very educated manpower. It's not your standard emerging market economy. Russia has certain very specific features of a developed economy. And therefore, the Russian businesses, entrepreneurs can produce a whole variety of goods. That point I would admit. But how can the Russian economy manage that? I think 3-4 years ago, Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev, he said, we are going to go in for diversificatia и modernizatia.
Diversification and modernization.
Away from oil and natural gas exports. So diversification and modernization and producing more consumer goods at home. How can Russia manage it? My point is, Russia, or any economy for that matter, the Indian economy tried to do it way back by imposing import controls, right, on a variety of items. People and businesses cannot import a whole lot of items. Therefore, they have to be produced at home. That is wrong. Keep the economy free. The external inflow, outflow of goods, capital should be determined by the foreign exchange rate of the ruble vis-a-vis other currencies. Keep it open, and at the same time, invite foreign investors. Look at China. Go back to 1972. Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State under Richard Nixon. What did they do? They opened up China to American foreign investment. And what happened to China? China grew at 10% a year for almost 2 decades, right? And today, the Chinese economy, almost a whole lot of consumer goods which you today find in American markets, they are produced in China. So China managed to produce a whole lot of goods, import substitution, by inviting foreign investors. Are the Russian policymakers ready to do that? Secondly, the climate in the Russian economy. Capital is flowing out. Why would people move in with their cash and their technology and their management expertise? On the other hand, if you take things like PepsiCo, all over Russia, right? Or McDonald's, all over Russia, from Moscow to Vladivostok. These are consumer goods, and the Russians love it. Automobiles. I can hardly catch my meeting in my hotel in the center of Moscow if I'm flying in from the airport, because there are so many cars. The car traffic in Moscow is incredible. Mm-hmm. So a whole lot of commodities have been produced in Russia at home. How? With foreign collaborators, right? And therefore this view that, we can do everything ourselves. Vladimir Putin has that view. Let us learn from our history. Our history provides all the answers. I don't agree with him. Of course, Russia has enormous richness in lots of varieties. I mean, I grew up reading Russian literature and I grew up listening to Russian music, right? But if it comes to business management, modern technology, modern consumer goods, Russia has to learn from outsiders, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? I mean, so this whole emphasis on import substitution out of some patriotic, nationalistic impulse, it is wrong because it will lead to wrong policies. It will lead to import controls, arbitrary, by some bureaucrats in Moscow. It happened in India. We know. And so it also leads to more corruption. Because when controls are imposed on businesses, they would try to sort of, evade those controls. So that is my view regarding import substitution. I read the article. I don't agree with it.
In the moments we have left, can I ask you on a related field if we should expect much change in the structure of the Russian labor force vis-a-vis private versus public? Over the last 10 years, the proportion of the labor force employed by the state sector has actually grown against some earlier expectations. I believe it's well over 40% now. And this idea of import substitution, of freeing up the economy for investment, of cooperation with foreign investors and foreign companies would seem to be asking for a reversal of the flow of labor into the state sector.
A reversal in what sense?
I would anticipate, or I'm wondering if you would anticipate, that the proportion of the Russian labor force employed directly by the state would be shrinking over the next period of time.
In state sector enterprises?
Yes.
Yes, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I would welcome it because state sectors everywhere are inefficient, from China to India to Russia to European countries, because they lack the competitive pressures of the private sector in any economy. And there's nothing wrong in workers moving into a competitive, efficiency-based environment of private industry. But Russian labor force, I mean, these are not sort of uneducated, illiterate laborers. Most of them are highly educated. They need proper training. And I would therefore again welcome foreign investment where this training, management, technology, all that comes with the cash which foreign investors bring. I mean, look at General Motors and Ford operating in Russia, right? I mean, that is to the advantage of Russian labor. They get the most advanced training and higher wages, and that is to be welcomed.
I think we can conclude with the thought that the diversification and modernization of the economy, which you've spoken of, citing Medvedev, is still squarely on the agenda, whether there are economic sanctions or not. I want to thank you for joining us, Professor Desai.
I'm very happy to be part of your program. Thank you very much for inviting me.